Hello, English learners, and welcome back to Softly Spoken English, the place where you learn English naturally by listening, relaxing, and enjoying real conversations at your own pace. I'm so happy you're here today. Before we begin, can I ask you something? When was the last time you started a conversation with someone you had never met before? Don't worry, you don't have to answer. Just think about it for a moment. Maybe it happened yesterday. Maybe it was months ago. Or maybe you're usually the person waiting for someone else to say the first word. If that's you, you're definitely not alone. I think almost all of us have felt that little hesitation. It's such a strange feeling, isn't it? We want to connect with people, but sometimes that very first sentence feels much bigger than it really is. Can I tell you something I've noticed? The best conversations almost never begin with brilliant words. They begin with ordinary ones. Good morning. That smells amazing. What a beautiful day. That's usually enough. We put so much pressure on ourselves to sound interesting that we forget something much more important. People rarely remember a perfect sentence. They remember how you made them feel. Now here's a little experiment. Imagine we're sitting in a quiet cafe together. Nothing fancy. Just 2 cups of coffee and people coming and going outside the window. Would we immediately start talking about our biggest dreams or deepest fears? Probably not. We'd begin with something small. And honestly, I think that's exactly how most meaningful conversations are born. Quietly and without anyone noticing. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You're waiting somewhere, maybe at the doctor's office or at the airport, and you notice someone sitting nearby. For a second, you think about saying something. Then another thought appears. What if they don't want to talk? Have you ever had that feeling? I certainly think most people have. It's amazing how quickly our minds can create doubts. But here's another way to look at it. What if the person beside you is thinking exactly the same thing? What if they're also wondering whether they should say hello? It's funny, isn't it? 2 people can be hoping for a conversation while both remain completely silent, simply because each one is waiting for the other to begin. I think adults make conversations much harder than children do. Have you ever watched 2 little kids at a playground? One of them walks over and says, "Do you want to play?" That's it. No overthinking, no rehearsing, no wondering if they sound interesting enough. Sometimes I wish we could borrow just a little of that fearless curiosity again. Life might feel a bit lighter. Of course, I'm not saying it's always easy. Walking up to someone new can feel uncomfortable. Your heart might beat a little faster. You might wonder what to say next. That's completely human. The goal isn't to stop feeling nervous. It's to realize that being nervous doesn't stop you from having a lovely conversation. Those 2 feelings can exist together. Can I share another thought with you? I don't think people are searching for perfect conversations. I think they're searching for genuine ones. There's a big difference. Genuine conversations have little pauses. Sometimes both people laugh at the same time. Sometimes they lose their train of thought. And somehow, those imperfect moments often become the most memorable ones. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to remember someone who made you feel comfortable? Maybe you don't even remember exactly what they said, but you remember how relaxed you felt around them. I think that's the quiet magic of a good conversation. It isn't about collecting clever sentences. It's about creating a moment where both people feel they can simply be themselves without trying so hard. Let's say you're waiting for a friend at a cafe. The table next to you is still empty, and someone walks in looking around for a place to sit. They smile for a second, almost as if asking permission without using words. You smile back. It's such a tiny moment, but I've always loved how a simple smile can make two strangers feel a little less like strangers. Can I ask you another question? When you're talking to someone, are you mostly thinking about what you're going to say next? Or are you really listening? I catch myself doing both sometimes, but whenever I slow down and truly listen, something changes. The conversation feels lighter, there's less pressure, and the next question seems to appear naturally, almost without any effort at all. Here's something I really enjoy. Listening to people talk about something they genuinely love. It could be gardening, photography, cooking, traveling, or even collecting old books. You can almost hear the change in their voice. They smile a little more, they speak a little faster, their eyes seem brighter, and honestly, you don't even have to share the same hobby to enjoy listening to that kind of enthusiasm. So, if you ever feel unsure about what to ask, try this instead of searching for something clever. Become curious. Ask about something the other person enjoys. Then simply listen. You don't need to fill every silence. You don't need to impress anyone. Sometimes your curiosity is far more interesting than any story you were planning to tell in the first place. Let's imagine someone tells you they love hiking. You could immediately start talking about yourself. Or you could smile and ask, "What do you like most about it?" I love that question because there's no single right answer. Some people will talk about nature. Others will talk about peace, fresh air, beautiful views, or the feeling of finishing a long walk. Each answer reveals a little piece of who they are. And that's another beautiful thing about conversations. They're not only about exchanging words, they're about discovering people, little by little. Nobody tells their whole story in 5 minutes. We discover each other one sentence at a time, one smile at a time, one question at a time. When you think about it that way, conversations become much less intimidating and much more enjoyable. Can I tell you about a mistake many of us make? We sometimes believe we have to keep talking, as if silence were something to fear. But a comfortable pause isn't a problem. It's part of a real conversation. Think about the people you're closest to. You don't rush to fill every quiet moment, do you? Sometimes a smile, a sip of coffee, or simply looking around together says more than another sentence could. I think silence gets a bad reputation. We often imagine it means the conversation is failing, but very often it simply means both people are thinking. Maybe they're enjoying the moment. Maybe they're deciding what to say next. Either way, there's no need to panic. A few quiet seconds can make the conversation feel calmer instead of awkward, especially when nobody is trying too hard. Now let me ask you something else. Have you ever met someone who made you feel as if you were the most interesting person in the room? Those people have a special gift. They don't constantly bring the conversation back to themselves. They make space for others. And I think that's one of the most beautiful communication skills we can develop, in English or in any language. The funny thing is, those people don't usually think of themselves as great conversationalists. They simply enjoy learning about others. They notice little details. They remember names. They ask one more question instead of changing the subject. That's such a simple habit, yet it makes people feel seen. And everyone enjoys feeling that someone is genuinely interested in them. You smile and say, "They seem much friendlier than we are." The other person laughs. That's it. Nobody planned the conversation. Nobody searched for the perfect opening line. You simply shared a little moment that was already happening. I've always loved that because it reminds me that everyday life quietly gives us opportunities to connect if we're willing to notice them. Sometimes we think confidence comes first and conversations come later, but I wonder if it's actually the other way around. Maybe confidence grows because we keep having small conversations. One at the bakery, one with a neighbor, one with the cashier at the supermarket. None of them changes your life on its own, but together, they slowly make speaking feel more natural. And perhaps that's the secret we've been looking for all along. Not one perfect conversation, but many small ones. Tiny moments that don't seem important at the time. A greeting, a compliment, a shared laugh. They may last only a minute or two, but they quietly teach us something valuable. Every conversation makes the next one feel just a little easier. You know what I find interesting? We often remember conversations that almost didn't happen. Maybe you nearly stayed quiet. Maybe you almost looked back at your phone instead of saying hello. But something made you speak. Looking back, it feels like such a small decision. Yet that tiny moment sometimes becomes the beginning of a friendship, a wonderful opportunity, or simply a memory that stays with you. I don't know about you, but I've always enjoyed meeting people who are easy to talk to. Not because they always know the right thing to say, but because they make the conversation feel comfortable. They laugh easily. They don't rush. They don't seem afraid of small pauses. Being around them feels peaceful, and I think that's a quality many of us quietly admire. Here's another little thought. The first question isn't really the hardest part. The hardest part is often the few seconds before it. That's where our imagination starts creating problems that don't even exist yet. We imagine awkward moments, uncomfortable silence, or rejection. Then reality arrives. And very often, it's much kinder than the story we invented in our minds. So, the next time you catch yourself overthinking, take a slow breath and look around. Is there something happening that both of you can notice? A beautiful sunset? A long line at the bakery? A cheerful dog? A song playing in the background? Everyday life is full of gentle invitations to start talking. We just become so busy that we sometimes stop seeing them. Before we finish today, I'd like to leave you with one last question. What if your goal wasn't to impress people? What if your goal was simply to leave them feeling a little happier after talking with you? I think that changes everything. Suddenly the pressure disappears, and kindness becomes much more important than perfection. And maybe that's what speaking naturally is really about. It's not using the most advanced vocabulary. It's not speaking quickly. It's not trying to sound like someone else. It's about being present, being curious, being kind. When those things come first, your English becomes more than just a language. It becomes a way of connecting with people. Can I ask you one more question? Have you ever replayed a conversation in your mind hours later? Maybe while driving home, washing the dishes, or getting ready for bed? I think we've all done that. We suddenly remember something we could have said or a question we forgot to ask. It's funny how our brains work. They always seem to come up with the perfect sentence, just a little too late. And honestly, that's perfectly normal. The good news is that every conversation teaches us something, even when it feels a little awkward. Maybe next time you'll ask one more question. Maybe you'll smile a little sooner. Maybe you'll worry a little less. That's how confidence quietly grows. Not through one perfect moment, but through dozens of ordinary conversations that slowly become easier. Looking back, you may not even notice when that change happened, but one day you'll realize it did. I sometimes think we expect conversations to be much more exciting than they actually need to be. Real life isn't a movie. Most conversations aren't unforgettable, and that's perfectly fine. They're about sharing little pieces of an ordinary day, talking about the weather, asking how someone's weekend was, laughing about something small. Those simple moments are often the ones that quietly build trust between two people over time. So here's a little idea I'd love for you to try this week. The next time you're buying a coffee, picking up groceries, or waiting for an appointment, notice how many opportunities you have to say just a few friendly words. Don't think of it as practicing English. Think of it as practicing connection. Somehow, when the focus shifts from speaking perfectly to connecting genuinely, the words seem to arrive much more easily. Before we move on, I'd like you to remember something. You don't have to become the most outgoing person in the room. That's never been the goal. Some people are naturally quiet, and that's perfectly okay. Being quiet doesn't mean you can't have wonderful conversations. In fact, some of the best conversations I've ever had were calm, unhurried, and filled with genuine curiosity instead of endless talking. Have you ever met someone who made you feel comfortable almost immediately? Not because they were entertaining, but because they were easy to be around. They didn't interrupt. They didn't rush to tell their own stories. They simply made space for the conversation to breathe. I've always admired people like that. They remind us that kindness has a voice, even when it's spoken very softly. Sometimes I wonder how many beautiful conversations never happened because both people were waiting for the perfect moment. But maybe the perfect moment doesn't exist. Maybe it appears after we decide to say hello. That's a comforting thought, isn't it? We spend so much time waiting to feel ready, while life quietly reminds us that readiness often arrives after we've already taken the first small step. Can I share one last observation before we continue? I've noticed that people usually respond to warmth much more than they respond to perfect English. They remember a genuine smile. They remember someone who listened patiently. They remember feeling welcome. Your accent, your grammar, or a tiny mistake often matter far less than your willingness to connect with another person in a sincere way. Let's imagine you're sitting on a park bench, enjoying a quiet afternoon. Someone nearby is reading a book, another person is walking their dog, and children are laughing in the distance. Nothing extraordinary is happening, yet everything feels peaceful. Moments like these remind me that conversations don't need a special occasion. Everyday life is already full of beautiful opportunities to meet someone new. Let's imagine you're sitting on a park bench, enjoying a quiet afternoon. Someone nearby is reading a book, another person is walking their dog, and children are laughing in the distance. Nothing extraordinary is happening, yet everything feels peaceful. Moments like these remind me that conversations don't need a special occasion. Everyday life is already full of beautiful opportunities to meet someone new. Before we say goodbye, I'd like you to remember one simple idea. You don't have to leave every conversation feeling impressed with yourself. Sometimes it's enough to leave knowing you were present. You smiled, you listened, you shared a few honest words. Those moments may seem small, but they're often the ones that slowly build confidence, kindness, and real connections with the people around us. So this week, I'd love you to try something. Start just one conversation. It doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe you'll simply say good morning to someone you've never spoken to before. Maybe you'll ask a simple question or make a friendly comment. Whatever happens, be proud that you took the first step. That's how every confident speaker begins. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I truly hope this conversation made you feel a little more relaxed about speaking English and meeting new people. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love to have you here again next time. Until then, take care of yourself, stay curious, keep listening, and as always, keep learning English naturally. See you in the next episode.